Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. Yes, I'm wearing this t-shirt because I'm still celebrating the World Series, but I'm also wearing it in honor of my guest today. If I were to stand up and show you the back of this t-shirt, you would see the name Posada and number 20 on it. That's Jorge Posada, the great Yankee catcher, and he was signed to a Yankee contract with my guest today. He is Leon Wurth, professional scout with the Milwaukee Brewers, but for years was the amateur scout with the New York Yankees and has some World Series rings to prove it. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Barry.
The most obvious question, in fact, we were talking about it before the program. What was it when you saw Jorge Posada playing ball that made you think this guy is a potential major league ball player?
Well, the game I saw him in, we'd spoken about when you see a guy and when guys are hot or cold. I happened to see him on a very good day. He had a home run from the right side of the plate, and the left side he's a switch hitter. He was playing shortstop, and he had the best arm on the field, and he had actions of an athlete. So that was number one. He really had a good day. So.
Well, there again, he's a shortstop. Now, what made you think this shortstop could become a great catcher?
Actually, I didn't think that. My boss asked me, can this kid play shortstop in the big leagues? I was telling him I really liked him. And
your boss would have been?
Bill Livesey.
Okay.
At the time. He was who's back with the Yankees now in his capacity, but he was the scouting director.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, well, what do you like about him? And I told him, I said, he could really throw. And I said, I'm not sure he can play shortstop in the big leagues. You know, he's okay at just junior college level.
And he was playing, what was the junior college?
It was John C. Calhoun Junior College in Decatur, Alabama.
And he would have been about how old then?
He was 18 turning 19.
Wow.
And actually he had come from Puerto Rico and was playing there, as many junior colleges in Alabama and Mississippi had a lot of Puerto Rican players. They had to get students. I think they worked out a good deal. So there were several ball players and other people, Latin Americans, mostly Puerto Ricans though, that would come, and Mississippi and Alabama seemed to be a haven. There was a lot of players. There was J.C. Romero, who pitched for Mobile, Alabama College, for the Twins, was signed there. So, yeah. So there were several good Latin players playing in Alabama, Mississippi, my area, that came over. But my boss said, well, he says, where do you think he can play? And I go, well, he might play third, he might play second. He did play second the first year we signed him. And the decision to make him a catcher was not determined until that fall when he went to instructional league with the Yankees. But my boss said, well, in his, I won't use the exact words he used, but he said, I just don't think he can run fast enough to play center field or shortstop, maybe third or second. He's going to hit pretty good, and he might play those positions. And he said, well, if he can't go get the ball, he said, let's put him in a position. Let's try him in a position where the ball comes to him, catching. So he played, and so I had a friend who coached I had drafted him the year before. And he was originally drafted by a Yankee scout out of Puerto Rico and came, so I inherited him. And they don't have this rule anymore, but it was called draft and follow for a high school kid going to junior college or a first-year junior college player coming back. So the next year, so we tried to sign him after his freshman year. His dad said he wasn't ready, wasn't going to sign. So we drafted him again. So I actually drafted him in like the 24th round, which surprised me because I thought there'd be takers. His dad actually worked for the Blue Jays at the time, and we thought they were just gauging what our interest was, and then the Blue Jays were going to draft him. Well, it goes 20-some rounds, and, you know, I'd wanted to sign the guy. So we drafted him again, following him again at the junior college. So that's kind of the history of it. So he had caught, my boss said, I heard he'd caught some in Puerto Rico over the summers, and so he played for the junior college ball ended in late April, May. They were out of the playoffs. And he wasn't going to go home till June, Jorge. So he stayed in Alabama. So they had a little summer league team. So I knew the coach for that team, and I said, hey, do you mind catching this kid for me? I said, sure, because he didn't catch in junior college, and they were, guys never caught, but in a summer league game. So we're out in the middle of some backwoods, where at the time, the cell phones weren't like they were today. It was early 90s, and the coach of the team was a bird dog, actually, for the White Sox. But he was a good guy, and he was in Alabama. They have tree farms, and he was a tree farmer. So he had yes, you've seen the show.
Oh, sure.
My Cousin Vinny, where they were driving, and
Yeah.
I said, I know what that's true. You'll get behind a lot of log trucks in Alabama. So anyway, so I saw Jorge play, and I brought one of my other bosses in to see him, and he had seen him before and really didn't like him much, and so he caught that game and he hit a home run, and he said, well, he's not flinching, and so that's when we said, okay. So he was kind of raw behind the plate. So we signed him, sent him out, and he played second base, and decided that he was you just don't put a guy behind the plate in the middle of a pro season that's never really caught before. So we had talked about being in Arizona and watching instructional ball, where I just came back from, and so Jorge, we put the gear on him, and that's when he started catching. And he's extremely dedicated and hardworking. His makeup is better than I thought. I knew it was good. He's a good kid, worked hard, but he's off the charts. I mean, to become a catcher, it's not an easy position. And his work ethic and baseball smarts. And his dad was a professional scout, so he had good genes. He grew up around baseball. Mm-hmm. So there's no nonsense kid. So I was fortunate in a lot of ways that his makeup was off the charts, and he could throw. He doesn't throw as well now. Obviously, he's 38 years old, but.
It's a tough position, wear and tear. You have. I think of Johnny Bench, who was a pretty fast catcher early in his career, and he was slow toward the end. It's tremendously difficult on your body. I mean, to do that, obviously.
Sure. There's no catching. Catching is a position that's difficult to find. If you can catch some, you can hang around for a long time, because it is difficult position. You get nicked and bruised, and it takes away from you offensively, because it's the most important defensive position on the field.
Well, and you think just the squatting down, constantly getting up and squatting down, all for the whole game. Yeah. And of course, in the Sports Illustrated article, you were quoted in it. He was being compared to Yogi Berra and Elston Howard and Bill Dickey, some of the great Yankee catchers. This season's interesting with the Yankees, with A.J. Burnett, the Yankee pitcher, the acquisition from Toronto, had a personal catcher in Molina, Jose Molina. What did you think about that, watching that, being a professional scout, being around ball all these years?
Well, I think it was Girardi's decision.
And he's an old catcher himself.
Sure. Well, as a matter of fact, Posada and Girardi were both on the 96 and 7, 8 teams, I believe.
Right.
And so Girardi was kind of Jorge's mentor when he came up. So I think number one, I think that it could happen where a catcher and a pitcher jibe better than others. And obviously there was maybe a little point of discussion in one game between Jorge and Burnett, and it was a good opportunity for Girardi, I thought. Molina was catching well and needed to catch, and Posada needs a day off. Every big league catcher gets a day or two off a week, particularly at his age. So it wasn't. A.J. Burnett is a high-strung guy. He may not go with the path that Posada wanted him to, or something, being a veteran guy. So. So as a professional scout, I see it all the time. So to me, it wasn't. It was curious, but I thought it was handled well by everybody. Although Posada chirped a little bit because he wanted to play, and he let it be known. And he's caught long enough that he can do that. And I think Girardi let him chirp, and voiced his displeasure and said, I'm the guy. I should be back there catching. And I think Girardi said, yeah, I understand that, should do it, but he's got to win, and he felt that his best combination was that pitcher-catcher. So in different venues, it happens maybe in different clubs with different pitchers. So the reasons why Posada and Burnett maybe or maybe not, I don't know. It was something that I noted, but you probably saw it and watched it, the exchanges, more than myself. I had other fish to fry. I do the National League East, so I noted it, but that's all I know about it, and I just took it as, for me, it was in today's age, and I thought Girardi handled it well.
Speaking of fish to fry, what have you been doing lately for the Brewers? You've been to the Arizona Fall League. Make some bold predictions of some ball players you saw that might make stars in the majors one day.
Well, the Arizona Fall League is fun to do. It's most everybody's top AA, AAA guys. I saw a couple of kids I had seen earlier in the year because I have the Braves organization now, and they've got a kid named Jason Hayward who will be the Braves center fielder for the next 10-plus years. He had a little hamstring problem in the league and didn't play much, and he was voted minor league player of the year, so I'm not telling baseball fans anything they probably don't know, but I will confirm that he is the best minor league guy I've seen in a long time. He's a tall, athletic, left-handed hitting bat that's 19, just turned 20, and he can hit and he can play outfield, and he'll probably play center field. The Braves' question is, will they start him there, or will they let him get a little bit more experience in the minor leagues? They had a bad experience with Jordan Schaefer, their outfielder, this year, and they pushed him and he failed. So, but and a first baseman named Freddie Freeman, who will be their first baseman for 10-plus years, and he's also 2021, and he may have another year AAA in him, and then he may be up at the end of the year. Those two guys will be solid major league players and occasional all-stars.
We've talked earlier about scouting, and again, just being a fan, it amazes us how you're able to tell. I know we talked before that you've got to be thinking, what's this guy going to be 3 or 4 years down the road? What's the secret to that? I mean, you see a guy, and you said he may be having a good day, maybe having a bad day. What's the secret to that for you scouts? How do you figure that out?
Well, sometimes we don't. A lot of times we don't. I think experience helps. I think that some guys have innate ability to see beyond. Some guys are just better than others. I mean, I've studied guys I work with. I've tried to give myself grades, and when I miss a guy, which if you scout, you're going to miss guys. The good scouts miss less than the other guys. As I've talked about many times, I maybe have told you about the pie charts of the high school kids. You got 100%, 1% go to college. You got a new pie chart. 5% of those goes play pro ball. That's minor leagues, another pie chart. So a lot of guys that are good, people tell me, oh, you were one of the best players. I can't believe, well, I wasn't even close. But, there's a lot of Paducahs and a lot of San Juan, Puerto Ricos, and Caracas, Venezuelas, and Japan, where we get all the players from now. So, I have high school coaches tell me back when I watched high school, oh, this kid's the best kid I've ever had. He's going to, and you're like, doesn't mean anything that he's the best kid you ever had. I mean, that's nice. He may play college, he may not. Doesn't mean anything. We're choosing from all over the country and all over the world, really. So a small town, and to be the best kid ever played there doesn't mean anything. That you may very well be. And I believe the coach when he says that. But his comparison and my comparisons, the field that we compare from is totally different. So that's fine. But to answer your question, it's I don't know. You would make a lot of money if you knew exactly. Every guy's different. Every position's a little different. You look at God-given ability, number one, was the basic thing you would do if you were doing Scouting 101. Those things don't change. A guy having a good day or a bad day will change. And but how fast he runs or how hard he throws, it starts out. You got to start there. He's got a lot more to do other than that, but you've got something to work with. David Eckstein, as an example of someone who, if you went and watched him, and a lot of scouts, I never did, but I probably would have, but a lot of scouts saw him play. He's an undersized guy that can't throw, he can't run, he can't hit with power. Those are the things that we look for. But he's got 2 World Series rings and was a viable part. He was very smart. So now you take into the other part that you can't see. Now you take into his aptitude. you know, and they say, well, he can't run very fast, he can't do this. You say, I know something about, like, he's a ball player. You know, he knows how to play the game. Doesn't run that fast, but coaches like him, and Eckstein, you know, was a guy, and there's been others like him. He just got a little better, and the coaches were like, well, yeah, I know, but man, he helped us win. And, well, he couldn't do that in the big leagues because, you know, in the big leagues it's better. And, well, some guys, and he'd get up there and he did, you know. So you'll go broke signing guys like that, saying it, but you still need to recognize that there's a spot for this guy. So if you're amateur scouting, you say, well, we're not going to give this guy $1 million. Nobody else likes him. We don't have to give him $1 million. But this is the guy I want to take a chance on. We used to call it with the Yankees, we'd say, give me your gut feel guys. Just give me your gut feel guys. So, you know, there's some guys, and it's a combination of, scouting is a combination of what you see, what your eyes see, and the other part is, you know, a feeling maybe, or this or that. Now, some guys will say, well, that's BS, we don't want to hear that. It's no defining thing. Different guys do it different ways. There's some guys that are strictly just by the books guys, just the facts. Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. He can run this fast, throw this hard. We'll throw him out there and see what happens. Now, me being an ex-college coach, you know, I understand makeup, and I think if I've had some success, it's because, you know, they are human beings, and there are guys that have great makeup and they have aptitude to play the game. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you with Posada, I said, oh, he's got super aptitude. I liked him. I liked the way he played the game, but I knew he was more advanced than the kids in Alabama he was playing from. He was from Puerto Rico, and they'd play ball all the time there, and his dad was a scout. So he was advanced. And sometimes you can get fooled, a guy that's as good as he's going to get. He may be better than the high school kids. You know, you see, well, I've had to tell parents when I coached in college, well, you know, my kid did hit this much and this much, yes, but he's already shaving, and he's bigger and stronger, and he only was successful because, not necessarily because of his baseball skills, he was just bigger and stronger than little Billy over here. The little Billy's skinny, but he can really run and throw, and when he gets strong, he's going to be a better ball player. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of projection also. So I know I've probably confused you about scouting, but
no, not at all.
But it's a difficult venue, and you would think the more you do it, the better it would get. But you know, the more I do it, sometimes the more I go, man. Particularly at my level now, with now I'm dealing not in high school and college anymore, but in professional level. So everybody's good, which you would think would be easier. But my boss wants to know, I know he's good, but should we trade Billy for Johnny? Is the Braves guy better than our guy? Well, they're both really good. So now you start dissecting. You know, it's like fine-tuning a car and a really good mechanic. Mm-hmm. This Hemi's a little better than this Hemi. Mm-hmm. They're both good. I mean, you'd say, well, yeah, they're both good, which is more or less what I need to do when I was doing amateur ball. But now we're talking about real finite, and now it gets to be very difficult where you are trying to determine, yeah, they know they're good, they're in the big leagues, or they're in AAA. Mm-hmm. You know, we all know that. How much better is he going to get? Mm-hmm. You know, is he going to be better than the guy we've got? So that's what it comes down now to what I'm dealing with. And it's difficult. There are some difficult questions you get asked.
We were talking a few years ago when you were on the program about this move toward computers, getting computers involved in these computer statistics. What's that doing nowadays? Are they doing in more of that computer stuff? In fact, was there a book written about computerized?
Moneyball.
Yeah.
Yeah, the scouts aren't very high on that. It's kind of like Big Brother. We don't need you. We'll just look at the stats. Well, we've always looked at stats, and those clubs that have gone with stats only really haven't had a lot of success. They've kind of, but what it did was incorporate, use stats more in your, if you say this guy's going to be that, do you have stats to back this up? Mm-hmm. I think most organizations now are going with that. Most of the general managers and people are younger, Harvard, Ivy League educated, they're familiar with stats, they're comfortable with it. The old guys weren't as much. I think there's a part of it, but I still think you can, you know, Will Rogers is one of my favorite guys. And you know why Will Rogers is one of my favorite guys? He says there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. Right. So, you know, I trust what I see, and I think most scouts do, and we don't like to be trumped by somebody saying, oh, you're wrong, the statistics say this. We can read statistics too, and we always have.
Yeah.
That's not part of the deal. I think and most people will tell you now, you incorporate what your people tell you, you look at the stats, you try to make a good decision. We're talking about millions of dollars. I would use stats, I would say, do I see a trend? I use them as a scout to say, this guy's getting better. The stats, he was bad this year, a little better. I think he's catching on. What I see, it looks like he's hitting the curveball better, whatever. Here's my stats to prove it, boom. But I can also use it to kill a guy if I don't like him. I can go look at his bad stats. There's so many stats out there. I say, fine, you want me to use stats? Okay. I still don't like this guy. I don't care what your stats say. Here's the stats I can pull up on the guy and just use those. So I can be specific and pull them out. Mm-hmm. So they don't bother me. I can use them to whatever I think I do. I'm still going to go with my gut when it comes down to it. Mm-hmm. That's what I was trained to do.
And I think baseball, too, to me, the big difference between baseball and football is that in football, if you're big and strong and mean, you succeed every time. But in baseball, it's much more sophisticated. And again, I guess what fascinates me is the old expression, on any given day, a last place team can beat a first place team. That doesn't often happen in football.
No.
Now, I'll confess to you that my favorite pro football team is the Cleveland Browns. And this year, they've won one game and probably won't win any more. But yet, any time in the season, the Yankees won it all. They could play the Rays and lose. And that's the thing about baseball that fascinates me is that, and somebody else said, and I love this too, baseball is the only game that you can think of, if you do something well a third of the time, batting, you're a superstar.
Well, I think that if you look at the other sports, basketball and football would be the top two, that where you talk about bigger, stronger, faster, quicker, and you can take these guys to a camp and do this. Now, David Eckstein's not going to come out of that group.
Right.
So, and a lot of other guys aren't. So therefore, it's a known commodity. There's less variables. Baseball has more variables. The high schools are different, but still, if you play at a certain level and John Calipari comes down and sees a high school kid play, he knows the competition he's playing against, and he can do that. I go out and see a high school kid down in Fulton. If there is a player, odds are that if you look, there's maybe only one college player in that whole area down there. So who he's playing against, his competition, is zero. So I just got to look at some God-given ability, and it leaves it to my imagination how good he is. So therefore, that's why there's so many scouts scouring areas looking, because the other sports, I think, are more consistent. They have an easier base, and you could just look at them on tape and go, okay, this guy's big and strong, boom, we got it. Well, big and strong doesn't help you hit the curveball, and that's what this game comes down to. Mm-hmm. So when we go look, we can't just put them all in a big gym and say, oh, this guy's going to hit A.J. Burnett's curveball. Where you got a better chance of doing that when you've got a combine in NFL where the guy runs as fast and does this. It's a simpler game. There's only so many variables, so many things that happen. Mm-hmm. Baseball, there's so many different positions you play that are a catcher is totally different than a center fielder, a pitcher. So you may see a guy playing somewhere and go, like Posada, he's not a shortstop, and, if he stayed there, he may never got to the big leagues. If you put him at catcher, he's maybe a Hall of Famer. So there's so many variables in the game. You never see a baseball game that's alike. You see a lefty out there, sidearm lefty, he can't break a pane of glass, but he's making millions of dollars in the big leagues. And then you got Rivera, who's, our Papelbon throwing 98, 99. You got two guys doing the same thing. They're closers. One guy, but they're not the same animal in any way, shape, or form. There's so many different ways to skin the cat, so to speak, in our business. There's not one guy you can say, well, you got A-Rod that was a big, tall shortstop. You got David Eckstein. You got Ripken, who was kind of a slow guy, but he was a great shortstop because he was smart and he made the plays. Well, I can't see smart with Ripken and working in a tryout camp. He is a good athlete, but he was so much more than that. Jeter's so much more than that. Yes, they had God-given ability, but then you have different animals that can still play in the big leagues. They may not be Jeter, they may be Eckstein. So you can't put them in one big pile and say, okay, run them through like you do football or basketball. Mm-hmm. I think it's because it's why it's such a great game. It's because the variables involved.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
You used to have so many variables going on. You have umpires, you got bad hops, you got a lot of conditions that in football and basketball are probably a little bit more controlled.
And something that's, to me, it's the great variety in performance. Going back to the World Series, Burnett pitches this great game, then he gets hammered for 6 runs, and it's the same guy doing the same thing, playing the same team, and that's what fascinates me about baseball. You don't really see an NFL quarterback do that. I mean, just have the terrific game and then just stink.
Right. He may not be as good.
Yeah, right, but I mean, you go
He
from,
doesn't.
like I said, the Phillies get up 6 runs, and that takes the Yankees pretty much out of that game, and and I guess that's where you can make $1 million. You can figure out why can a pitcher go out one day and be absolutely unhittable, and his next turn, he's a batting practice pitcher.
Well, there's A.J. Burnett he's different than Maddox or Smoltz or Glavine or some of those guys. I mean, Smoltz gave you the same, Glavine, Maddox, but they're just different makeup. A.J. Burnett he would probably tell you his focus is not always there. His stuff is as good as I've ever seen. He should win 22 games every year like that based on his stuff. Now, the other things he has to control and his focus or whatever, I don't know. His stuff is very, very good. And that's when you have different guys, you may say this guy doesn't have as good a stuff as A.J. Burnett, but he's more consistent. For whatever reason, he's just figured out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And now you got professional people talking to other pitchers with great stuff, and they never play in the big leagues, and they can throw it through the wall, and I've seen it happen many times, but they don't have the constitution, maybe to pitch in front of 50,000 people. Mm-hmm. They're great in minor leagues, but they get up there, they're not the same guy. Now, we pay these guys a lot of money, we pay coaches a lot of money, we have doctors, shrinks to talk to these guys. Some guys just they can't do it. Where Maddox and these guys, it's innate. They're there, they know what they're doing. Boom. And that's why you would say, well, I'll take this guy. Well, this guy throws harder. So when you talk about scouting, now you go into the other thing of, okay, now when you get to the big leagues, it's more about performance, it's more about a guy's makeup, about what's this guy all about. Some guys like competition, some guys don't. You don't know about, the toughest part about going back to high school is you got Billy, and Billy is the best guy by far. He never fails. Billy rarely makes an out, or if he's pitching, he rarely loses because his competition. So you think, yeah, he's a good kid and blah, blah, blah. And, he goes out to Billings, Montana, and he starts facing people of his ilk, and he fails. And he finds out he doesn't like it. And he finds out when he comes home to, his homecoming queen girlfriend, his dad's got a construction business, and come and work with me. So, and he just doesn't like to compete. He loved to compete when he won every time, but he never got beat. So when you're dealing with a high school kid, he rarely gets beat, or he's usually the basketball and football guy, so all he's known is success. So when you start getting in competition, and that's the biggest thing I've seen with a lot of high school kids, you don't know how they're going to handle failure, because you don't see them fail much. I wanted to see a kid fail, because I wanted to see if he gritted his teeth and came back the next time and said, you're not going to get me out this time. Because that's the bottom line is, when you watch baseball and everybody watches it and, well, it's nice. You know what it comes down to? It comes down to competition. Whether you want to talk, in the politically correct world, that pitcher is trying to get you out. And it's a tough game, and he's going to try. You better want to beat him as bad as he wants to beat you. And a lot of guys get to the big leagues. You say, well, how come a lot of guys never make it? Oh, they were the best guy in this area. They were the best. They succeeded. Some guys are just better competitors. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So another factor you take into as a scout, when you say, what do we look for? How does he compete? How does this guy compete? And you see a guy that competes, you go, David Eckstein competed like nobody.
Oh, sure he did.
So there's so many factors, and that's why, again, it's part of it's baseball, but when you say, what do you scouts look for, blah, 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 sometimes you just don't see it either. I mean, you see a guy a couple games, he may not, sometimes being at the right place at the right time as a scout. Now I get a better chance now because I see in professional ball what I do, I see teams several times. So I get a good look at I usually see a team a couple times, minor league team. So I see them, 6 to 10 games maybe. So it's different than when I go to high school. You get a 1 or 2 time look. you got to really be paying attention. And they may not show you. You may not see it. So you have to be discerning. You have to really be careful. You have to pay attention and hope they show you something, and that you can go, And the more experience you have, the more that you have a tendency that when they do something, your eyes pop wide open and go, oh, okay, that's what I'm looking for.
If we could now to kind of shift gears, give me your analysis of the playoffs first, and then the World Series. I'm sure you watched that with great interest, like all baseball people do. Any surprises in the playoffs to start with? Personally, I thought the Cardinals would go a lot farther than they did.
I thought the Cardinals in September were the most underrated team, and with their pitching, I thought they were the least talked about team. And if they had played the World Series in August and September, I think the Cardinals, I would have put my money on the Cardinals to win, because when Carpenter and Wainwright were the two best guys for the bulk of the year. And again, being the hot team at the hot time, the Cardinals weren't. You know, they ran away with it. Again, here we go with competition, and they kind of cruised in, and did they lose their edge, their mojo? But, you know, and Panero's an awfully good third option. So I said, you know, nobody's talking about the Cardinals. That'd be my team to win, because it comes down to pitching. But nothing surprises me in the playoffs. We've talked about that.
Oh, absolutely.
They're all good teams, and it depends on who gets hot and not. So I'm not surprised. Certainly not surprised by the Yankees at all. I mean, they had the best team, but, I mean, you know, they've bought every all-star on the planet. And I would think as a Yankee fan, you would have to take less pride in this team than any other, because they're long overdue. I mean, they've been paying their salary so much more than everybody else's. I don't think the baseball world, I think it's a ho-hum. To me, I think that baseball fans were like, ho-hum, you know, so what? They bought Teixeira, they bought Cesar. I mean, my God. And three players, they've got more money than most teams have. So, no, not surprised. I'm surprised they haven't won it in years past with as much money as they've spent.
Because we've talked about that before, and you go back to when you were the Yankees, they were a bunch of good ball players. Now, you obviously had Jeter, who's Hall of Fame, probably Posada, definitely Rivera, Pettit maybe. But, you know, and we've talked about this before, and you said that the leader on those old Yankee teams was the first baseman, Tito Martinez, who is not in the Hall of Fame and will never be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Paul O'Neill, Brocious.
Absolutely. You know. Scott
Well, that's
Brocious,
fine. I mean,
Knobloch, all those guys.
Yeah, there's different ways to skin a cat. I mean, you know, that's fine. I mean, they won, and they had the money to do it, and that's what the system allows. And they've tried everything for years, I think, to stop the Yankees from having the most money and being able to go get the right players.
But, you know, we talked this before. If you recall, you came on after the 01 World Series, and I remember you asked me, you said, okay, and you were at the game in Arizona. You're 2 outs away from defending your World Series title. You go back, and I'm sure Rivera has replayed that in his mind over and over again. He makes the throw to second base. I think that there was a potential double play ball follows that. And that's when Steinbrenner just went crazy. And that's when the payroll shot through the roof. He goes out and he buys all these ball players. Run the list. Giambi, Carl Pavano, American Idol, IDLE, the New York sports writers called him. And they did no good. Any feel as to why Steinbrenner just totally junked the system that brought him those championships, those good ball players? He was on a bench of buying these superstars, Brown, Kevin Brown, all these guys, and they were all big busts.
Well, you know, the guys that they've bought now aren't big busts.
So I think you would say they were better shoppers.
They did a better job shopping.
Now, is that because he let Cashman do it, or what do you think?
No, sometimes it's just bad luck. Sometimes a big part of it is who's on the market that year. You know, the Mets try to do it all the time, and the years that they really had money to spend or needed to go get a guy, they had limitations on the market. You know, Teixeira's probably the best first baseman in baseball, defensively and offensively. CC Sabathia is arguably the best.
Did you know Sabathia when he was with the Brewers? You ever around him much?
Yeah, enough to know that he was a better person than he was a pitcher.
Really?
Oh, outstanding, top of the line guy.
Yeah.
Makeup out, just a wonderful person. Maddox, our pitching coach, was like, you know how good a pitcher he is. He said he's a better person than a pitcher. City of Milwaukee loved him. He was just gracious, hardly no ego for a guy of that ilk. You know, and you see the Barry Bonds and the people that get the bad raps and everything in baseball. Every bad actor is going to be on the front page. Now this guy's, and that's why it hurt a lot to lose him to the Yankees money-wise, just because he was such a presence and he was such a leader by example. You know, and for our young guys who, you know, young guys that are good have a tendency to be cocky or whatever. They have to go through the growing pains and all the adulation. And so to have a guy that's of his ilk and to handle it like a professional and be a family man and just a class guy, he's big in a lot of ways. And I dare say he probably was a super addition to that team. Where if you go back and look at Randy Johnson or Kevin Brown when the Yankees got him, probably not.
Yeah, to say the least.
Probably not.
Yeah, yeah. You haven't been to the new ballpark, you said.
I have
the
not.
Yankee
Have not been to the new
Stadium.
ballpark, no.
And I must say, as a Yankee fan, it's a beautiful facility, but it is soulless in my view. And going back to George Steinbrenner, I like to call it the house that George built. And watching the World Series, I told my wife the one regret I had was that this 27th championship wasn't won in the old park. There was an aerial shot, and the big new ballpark all lit up, and there was this black hole over there. and again, I think that's a travesty. And I did say before the program, and I'll say it again, that the New York Daily News has a special running, keep these players, dump these people. And I did push dump Steinbrenner for both of us on that. I was surprised, only 19% of Yankee fans did. And I was under the impression, maybe it's just the Yankee fans I know, that those of us who love that team as an institution, there's not any real great love for this guy as an owner. It just seemed to me that what he did was he didn't let the baseball people run that team. I think the way he treated Joe Torre was shabby beyond belief, but that's just my opinion for whatever it's worth.
Well, Joe made a lot of money there, and I don't know that Joe has any ill will toward him. I mean, you know, he made a good living, and I think for most Yankee fans, they wouldn't be as concerned about the nuts and bolts and how it was done. They're just glad it's done. And I think that's your basic basic fan, which is fine.
And I think that's very sad because maybe it's to me one of the qualities I most admire in people is loyalty, and maybe that's why I'm not a millionaire, never would be. But to me, after what Joe Torre did with that team, for them to do him the way they did by offering him a contract they knew he would refuse, and to drive him off like that is unconscionable. When the Dodgers won, I was watching him being interviewed, and I told my wife, I said, he looks a whole lot better in pinstripes. Had I been the Steinbrenners, he would have managed that team. I just think I realize it's a business, but the cold-bloodedness of that I couldn't look at myself in the mirror, which is why I'm not a baseball executive, never could be, I guess.
I don't know what to say to that. I know it worked out well for Joe.
It did, and I'm very pleased.
And I'm happy. I've always been a Girardi guy. I'm very happy for Girardi. I think embodies a lot of what the Yankees are about.
What is he? You know, what is he like? I mean, he seems to be about as implacable as Torre. You know, what I love about Torre, they would show the scenes in the dugout. You couldn't tell if they were 10 up or 10 down. His was the great stone face.
Yeah.
And I watched, you know, as the Game 6 came to an end, his reaction, and it was these guys. He was standing, and these two guys hugged themselves over the top of him. It was really funny. What is he like as a person?
He's a very intelligent individual. I believe he's a Northwestern grad.
Is he from Chicago?
Yeah, I was a little surprised when the Cubs got Piniella. I thought that Girardi, being a local guy, would have been. But anyway, that's way above my pay grade. I think he's a player's coach. I think he was all business when he played. I think Torre was a great mentor. I think Joe was I think Girardi is very similar to Torrey. I think he probably thinks this is the way to do it. Particularly, this is the way to handle New York. This is the way to handle the press. I think he, uses Jeter the way he should with players, and if there's issues that he doesn't need to handle, Jeter handles them. And says, you need to not do this. And so Girardi doesn't have to be the bad guy or do that. Let's those guys do it. I think he knows who to point and do that, which I think is, when you got New York and that many egos and that much money and guys playing, I think he knows the guys on the team that he can do certain things with, which is when you come down to managing people, you can't handle everybody the same, no matter what they tell you. In the books, he knows. He's a smart guy who, and I think when you do baseball and you coach, it's such a long season that the highs and lows are such that you have to develop that type of, you can't, we lose today, you don't like it, but it's 162, we can start bad. A lot of things happen. I've seen, a lot of things happen that you didn't know was going to happen, and you can, it's just not like football where, if you lose 2 or 3 games in a row, then you're done. You're not going to make the playoffs.
Right.
And I think that most baseball people and managers particularly, you get that persona and you just, it's a day-to-day grind and you don't get too high or too low until you win the World Series. Then you jump up and down like little kids. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And because it's a long, hard haul, and there's you should win, but sometimes you don't win.
Oh, absolutely. And I've quoted you lots of times. It's the hot team that wins. And if you make the playoffs, anybody has a chance of pulling this thing out, regardless.
Sure, they're all good to get there, and you have you may have a pitcher who Vicente Padilla with the Dodgers, that they picked up from Texas, I think he took Billingsley's spot. Since I didn't have a dog in there, I can't say that I watched the playoffs probably with as much intensity as you.
Well,
I saw some, but but he was outstanding. He was the hot pitcher, so he supersedes any of the other Dodger pitchers. Torrey throws him out there because he's the best guy he's got. Now, nobody would have said that he's going to be the best guy he's got, but he was the best playoff pitcher he had. He was shutting people out. So things change, and he's not the guy that was in April and May. Your guy may be in AAA at the end of the year. So it's a long, hard haul, and guys get hot, guys get cold, and the playoffs. I've told you many times. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by anything that happens. They're all good teams when they get to that point, and it's just a team that. And you get, there's some luck involved. There's some breaks. There's just so many.
Sure.
There's just so many factors. So. Again, it's not like, it's a big upset. Wow, they beat the Phillies, the defending world champ. In football or basketball, you're like, whoa, that was an upset. Mm-hmm. In baseball, there's very few upsets. In the playoffs.
Alex Rodriguez's performance, you think the monkey's off his back, at least temporarily? He gets big hits in big games and big moments, and that had always been the knock on him. Did that impress you?
No, it didn't. I think the monkey's off his back temporarily, but.
Fans can be brutal about this. I mean, as you well know.
Yeah, and A-Rod has the problem of he has so much God-given ability that it's hard to live up to it. So to give him a break, there's a lot expected of him, and being a scout, I expect him to do what he did, and so. The Yankee fans, if he goes back to old A-Rod next year, then there's a bigger monkey, and they would call it a gorilla on his back in New York.
So, I know. As I said,
it would be, the old.
The fans. I've been in ball games in the Yankee Stadium when he would strike out. I mean, the screams, the boos, it was brutal. It reminded me of the Romans in the Coliseum. Then there's Andy Pettitte, old steady Andy. His performance, I mean, he's nudging them all toward 40 years old, still pitching.
He has amazed me. Not because I think when the Yankees originally let him go, and he went to Houston, the reason is the doctor said his arm was everything was going to come undone. His elbow, the ligaments were done. He's still pitching. So. Baseball. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he did it. But the reason the Yankees let him go originally was they loved him. They didn't want to let him go, but the medical people said, you can't invest this kind of money. Here's the x-rays. Here's what we're looking at. And he's still pitching, 8 years later and winning a World Series for the Yankees. So he's absolutely amazing. But not because Andy Pettit's Andy Pettit. I mean, there's no question. He's a big game pitcher, and he knows exactly what he's doing. It's just physically, how does he do it?
And on that topic, I believe Mariano Rivera turns 40 in the month of November. How much longer can he go, do you think?
Well, there's no, the Brewers have Trevor Hoffman, and he's the same age.
Right.
The problem with closers is they're like catchers. They can do it for as long as they can, because even Mariano Rivera at, let's say he's 80% of what he was in the heyday, is still better than most every other reliever in baseball. So now he pitches on smarts and guile. He doesn't have the stuff he had. It's still good. He can go, and God just was, I would say God blesses some guys with arms that don't fall apart. I would say Nolan Ryan was one, and I'd say Mariano Rivera's another guy. He's never had arm issues that I know of. I don't know, he maybe had a stint or two on the DL in all his time.
Not many.
But if you go to, when you look back, and it's easy, he was kind of a given, I guess, the Rivera, and now he's starting to get his just desserts. When you look at how many games were blown by Major League Ball clubs, and now that I'm doing it, I see it, and I hear fans all over griping about their closer. Their 8th inning guy, their 7th inning guy. Nobody has. So for Rivera to be that solid stone with the Yankees, there's no question in my mind when they talk of the Yankee dynasty. This guy is. I don't care. Jeter, Posada, Bernie Williams, whoever you talk about, when you know you can go to the bullpen, just like this year. Now, there's not many other teams to do it. If you put a pen and paper and you go to the other closers in baseball, this guy is a Hall of Famer easily, and he is the shining star of the Yankee dynasty in the 90s.
I agree.
I mean, it's just because of the position,
Yeah.
and there's nobody else that has done what he has done for that long in big games.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the biggest. He is there. He's done it. If it was just where he had to throw the ball to the plate, it's when he has to throw to the other bases that he's had trouble in big games.
Yeah.
But I've told you many times this, Barry, and I don't think people know. I was there at Game 7 in Arizona where there was 60,000 people, and it was almost scary. It was so loud, and the pressure. I don't know if I could have stood up and walked, much less catch a ground ball.
Right.
It was unbelievable.
That's what amazes me too, right.
So I said, I should count this. I don't know how many times you cannot practice. You can practice all the bunts and throws to second you want in spring training, whatever. But in front of that many people, how many bottom of the 9th innings of 7th games of World Series has there been? Bottom of the 9ths.
Right.
So you can't practice that, because you may live 2 or 3 lifetimes to be a ball player and you never experience it. You may never experience it and play forever. So, to have that kind of pressure and do what he's done is amazing.
And along those same lines, my dad and I were talking. Holloway, the Cardinal outfielder, that drop fly ball, that'll be played over. Bill Buckner, who was an excellent first baseman, and it's like, I remember when the Red Sox won in 2004, someone said, "Do you feel vindicated?" He said, "Vindicated? What do you mean vindicated?" He was very upset about it, and I don't blame him. But every time they show these highlight shows on ESPN, there is the ball going between Buckner's legs, and this poor Cardinal outfielder, the ball bounces, easy catch, bounces off his glove. And that's such a shame, because these guys who played good baseball and will continue to play good baseball,
sure,
that's what they're going to be remembered at.
Well, yeah, Holliday was the reason that they got there. I mean, when they traded for him, which was a coup, Pujols all of a sudden had somebody to hit, and he, and looking at the replay, and I don't think he harped on it, but it hit him in the stomach, and it wasn't a hard catch, and he's not a bad outfielder. I mean,
but he's human.
But a bad outfielder catches that one. So I would think he lost it in the, it was twilight.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if you remember Joe Pepitone in the '63 World Series and lost the ball at Dodger Stadium in the white shirts.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, that can happen.
So that kind of reminded me, and I don't think he harped on it. It was unfortunate, but that's baseball and fate. This guy was the Cardinals' savior, and it was sad, but it was just one of those where it looked like, I think he went like that, and he was going to catch it like that.
Oh,
and
it sort of
hit him right here.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to lose it, and I don't know there's nothing you can do about that. You can chastise. Now, Buckner was a ground ball. I should have called this. I'd have to say he lost it in something, or he just didn't see it. And I do think that turned the series around. The Cardinals still may have won on that. But
on that topic, how does a guy recover from that? I mean, obviously this is eating at him, but I mean, how do you let go of that if you're this fella?
Well,
well, you go back at Rivera. I mean, they had that game 2-1, and they ended up losing it. And how does he put that behind him?
Well, they've had a lot of success to build on other than that.
Well, I think so, and I think in the case that Game 6 and it ends with an easy ground ball and it's over and he wins it, but is Holiday going to feel, until I get back in the World Series and do something to vindicate myself? I mean, how's he going to react to that? I
think he handles it. I think that part of getting to the big leagues and playing a lot is that you talked about. I think the thing you said that's the most is if you hit 300 in baseball, you're really good, and that means you fail 7 out of 10. So, and the biggest point that I had to try to deal when I coached in college was competitive guys, to let them stay competitive but not let the last at bat where they struck out affect the next at bat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference between a professional and amateurs that I had to deal with. My biggest thing was you cannot let that at bat, and they're emotional and they're mad, or the umpire called them out on a bad pitch. And I said, you only got so many. I would explain, I said, you got so many at bats in your college career. Are you going to let me, if I'm up here because you're not doing what I tell you, or your girlfriend in the stands that's mad at you or whatever, or the umpire or the pitcher, take away, you got so many at bats and you're still mad. You made an out that time because you made an out the last time before. Professional people don't do that. Professional hitters don't do that. Every at bat is a new entity. You have to look at it professionally. I would say Holiday and those guys, they've been through that. I mean, they're in the big leagues. He's had thousands of at bats, thousands of successes, thousands of failures. Does he feel bad? Yes. Will it affect him? I don't. Yes, he feels bad, and different people, different way. I don't know him, so it's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say in professional, when you play, you understand this is part of the game. It happens. It's unfortunate, but professional, you turn the page and go on. Yes, and that's the reason why Girardi, they never get too high, too low. Stuff happens like that. You see everything happen in baseball, and you do have to get past it. You do have to go on. You blow a game. Reliever blows a game. He doesn't. It's the same way. He's got to come back and save the game the next night. So you have a reliever's mentality, and that's why some guys can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, some guys can't, or they have a more difficult time. The good closers, Trevor Hoffman, Rivera, they've blown games. They don't like it. They don't sleep good that night, maybe, they do. But the next night they come back, they save the game. Everybody's happy. They jump up and down, blah, blah, blah. It's forgotten. You kind of go on. This is a little tougher because he's got all winter, to do it. So. Some like the Buckner thing is the fans and everything. Nobody lets you forget it, and you do different things to deal with it. But with him, I think it's and I haven't been in this area, so I don't know if with the Cardinal fans if it's been in the papers that
well,
much.
You had said once before we were talking that St. Louis, I believe you said, was the best baseball town. That Cardinal fans are very knowledgeable. They will acknowledge a good play by the opposition, and I would be very surprised if Cardinal fans are all over this guy.
No.
What I was getting at, do you think he'll get down on himself? Because again, he's got the whole winter to think about this. Now, if this was back in May, he drops a fly ball. Okay, so what? You've got all these games to come up with, and again, it was in this pressure position. And you're absolutely right. And just being a fan. Watched a baseball game. That Game 6, the Yankees are up 7-1, and I thought, I'm going to be worried until that last out is made. because that's just, and I'm thinking to myself, you watch these games, you get into these games, just as a fan, your heart's pumping and you're off, and you think, how can these guys do that? You're absolutely right. When you're talking about the game in Arizona, you almost can't stand up.
Yeah.
But they're out there, and I mean, these screaming fans, and they're performing.
Yeah, I don't think with him. I think he's been around the block long enough. I don't see it being. I don't see it affecting him at all next year.
Mm-hmm.
He's not happy about it, blah blah blah. But he's a professional, and he had a good year.
Oh yeah, sure.
I mean, if he had a bad year, he would probably feel worse if they paid him a lot of money and the Cardinal fans were expecting this and he didn't. He wasn't loafing. He wasn't.
Oh no.
It
happened.
Like I said, I don't think it was because it was much of a gaffe as it was. I think it just was. I don't know. I've seen the play and I'm like, it looked like he lost the ball, and I think he said something about that. Well, if it lets the ball go through your legs, I mean that's one thing. The pressure of it. I didn't see that as like a pressure situation. I just think I don't think he. I think he's a professional. I don't see it. I don't see that with Buckner at all. I don't see it as the same thing.
But you know the thing about Buck, I read a piece after that apparently, and reading from the baseball people, that area around first base in Fenway Park is notorious for bad hops, and that some first basemen, when they're out there before the game warming up, will have ground balls hit to them to watch.
Well, Barry, there's always the rest of the story, and I want to give you Paul Harvey here if we've got time.
Sure.
And you may know this, but the manager, John McNamara, had a very good, in the game they won, and most coaches will put their defensive replacements in. Here's a guy with bad knees. They can't get down the ground ball. And you got Dave Stapleton, who's a above average defensive first baseman, if I recall. So the gaffe on my part was the manager by not putting Stapleton at first base.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's all I can say with the Billy Buckner thing. When you look at stuff, there's always in baseball, it's great because, it's like the puzzle. Oh, here's another piece of you see something that happens and you go, well, why did that happen? And you know how like a year or two later, all of a sudden somebody says something, you go, that's why that guy did that. Well, it's usually not just one thing. So, why did McNamara put in the defensive guy? This never would have happened. It would have been there. It's somebody else's mistake ends up, and it looks like it was this mistake. How wars get started, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It's no different in baseball. I think that's the number one thing. He put a guy in a situation where he shouldn't have been in. All good coaches in any sport, they'll tell you, I want to put my guys in a situation to succeed. And if you've got the parts to put in there, this is what we're going to do. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm John Calipari. I got running gun guys. We're going to dribble drive, and we're going to outscore the other team. So I know what I've got. This is what good coaches do. I'm going to do this. So anyway, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But with your question about Holiday, no, I don't think there's any long-lasting effects.
I hope not.
I think he's not a young kid. If he was a 22, 23-year-old rookie, yeah. Oh, gee, do I belong up here? This guy's played and made a lot of plays in the outfield and hit. He'll recover and be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any long-lasting effects.
I hope he does. We're out of time.
Already.
Thanks for joining us. My guest today was Leon Wurth. I'm Barry Craig. Please join us next time.